She betrayed her husband in the stifling heat of their three-car garage, while 50 of their closest friends drank cocktails and laughed by the pool just 20 feet away, and I will never forget the sound of the automatic door grinding shut, sealing us inside a darkness that felt heavier than the humid night air. I was 23, sweaty from carrying cases of beer, and I had only walked into the garage to grab a stack of folding chairs for the overflow guests. I didn't expect Lydia Henderson to follow me in. She was 46, my best friend's mother, a woman who usually presided over these parties with a plastic smile and a glass of Chardonnay permanently fused to her hand. Tonight, she was different. She was wearing a backless silk dress that cost more than my tuition. Her eyes were glassy with too much wine and something darker, more reckless. She didn't say a word as she walked past me to the wall panel and hit the button to close the main garage door. The sudden mechanical roar of the motor cut off the party noise like a guillotine blade, plunging us into a silence broken only by the hum of the vintage refrigerator in the corner and the frantic beating of my own heart. As the last sliver of twilight vanished beneath the descending door, the single, dim bulb overhead flickered, casting long, distorted shadows across the polished hoods of her husband's prized car collection. "Mrs. Henderson?" "The party," I started, my voice sounding too loud in the enclosed space. She turned to me, leaning back against a workbench cluttered with expensive tools her husband never used. She looked out of place here, a diamond in a grease pit. "The party is boring, Alex," she said, her voice a low, slurred purr that made the hair on my arm stand up. "And please, stop calling me Mrs. Henderson. It makes me feel like I'm already dead." She pushed herself off the bench and walked toward me, her hips swaying with a deliberate, predatory rhythm. The air in the garage was suffocating, thick with the smell of gasoline, old leather, and her overpowering, floral perfume. She stopped inches from me, invading my personal space with a confidence that was terrifying. She reached out, her manicured fingers brushing the front of my shirt, ostensibly to flick away a piece of lint, but her hand lingered, the heat of her palm burning through the thin fabric. "You're sweating," she observed, her eyes locking onto mine, dilated and hungry. "Is it the heat? Or is it me?" The risk was astronomical. Her husband, Mr. Henderson, a man who bragged about his gun collection as often as his stock portfolio, was literally just on the other side of the wall, grilling steaks. Her son, Jason, my best friend since kindergarten, was probably looking for me right now to help tap the keg. Being caught alone in the dark garage with his mother wasn't just awkward, it was social suicide, potentially dangerous. I tried to step back, to put some distance between us, but I backed right into the cold chrome bumper of the 1967 Cadillac Eldorado. I was trapped. Lydia noticed my retreat and smiled, a sharp, humorless expression. She stepped closer, pinning me against the car. "You know, Alex," she whispered, leaning in until I could smell the oaky wine on her breath. "I've watched you grow up. I've watched you turn into everything my husband isn't. Kind. Listening. Fit." Her hand moved from my chest to my shoulder, her grip surprisingly strong. "I'm tired of being just a mom. Just a wife. Tonight, I want to be bad. And I think you want that too." This was the hook. The forbidden fruit dangled right in front of me. She wasn't just flirting. She was propositioning me with a bluntness that was shocking. The atmosphere shifted from awkward to electric. The garage felt less like a storage space and more like a pressure cooker. I should have pushed past her. I should have hit the button to open the door. But I didn't. I was paralyzed by a mix of fear and a sudden, undeniable surge of adrenaline. She was beautiful, broken, and offering me a secret that could destroy two families. "Lydia, we can't," I managed to choke out. "Mr. Henderson is right outside. Jason could come in for a beer. Let them come," she hissed, her mood swinging instantly from seductive to defiant. "Let him see. Maybe then he'll actually look at me." She grabbed my hand and pressed it against her waist, the silk of her dress cool and slippery. "But he won't come. He's too busy impressing his golf buddies. And Jason is too busy chasing the caterers. We are invisible here, Alex. Just you and me, and the ghosts of my marriage." She leaned her head back, exposing the long, elegant line of her throat, inviting me, daring me. The tension was unbearable. I could hear the faint, muffled bass of the music outside, a reminder of the world we were hiding from, but in here, the only reality was the heat of her skin and the dangerous promise in her eyes. Just as her lips parted to say something else, a sudden, violent rattling shook the side door of the garage, the pedestrian door that led to the backyard patio. A heavy fist pounded on the metal. Bang. 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 My heart stopped. Lydia froze, her eyes widening, the seduction instantly replaced by panic. A voice, muffled but unmistakable, shouted from the other side. "Hey! Who closed the damn door? Alex? Are you in there? The keg is kicked, man, bring the backup." It was Jason, my best friend. He was standing 3 feet away, separated only by a thin sheet of metal and a deadbolt. If he had a key, or if the door was unlocked, he would walk in and find his mother pressed against me, his best friend's hand on her waist. Lydia reacted instantly. She slapped a hand over my mouth, silencing my gasp, and used her other hand to shove me hard, pushing me down. "Hide!" she breathed, her voice a terrified whisper. She pointed toward the far side of the Cadillac, away from the door. "Get down. Behind the car." She didn't move away from me. She moved with me, crouching low in the shadows of the vintage vehicle, pulling me down into the narrow space between the car door and the wall piled high with storage boxes. We were huddled together in the dust and grease, limbs entangled, hiding like guilty teenagers. The pounding on the door continued. "Alex? Mom? I know someone's in there. The light is on!" Jason shouted, rattling the handle again. He wasn't leaving. He was getting suspicious. Lydia looked at me, her face pale in the gloom, and then she did something insane. She reached out and turned off the overhead light switch on the wall next to us, plunging the garage into total, pitch darkness. "Don't breathe," she whispered into the black void, her hand finding mine and squeezing it so hard her nails dug into my skin. We were trapped in the dark, silent, and terrified, while the person we were both betraying stood just outside, demanding to be let in. The darkness in the garage was absolute, a heavy, suffocating blanket that erased the familiar shapes of the tool benches and turned the vintage Cadillac into a sleek, metallic beast lurking in the shadows. We were crouched in the narrow crawl space between the car door and the wall, our bodies forced together by the limited space. The air was thick with dust and the lingering scent of gasoline, but cutting through it all was the sharp, intoxicating smell of Lydia's perfume and the heat radiating from her skin. Outside, Jason rattled the handle one last time, muttered a curse about finding the spare key, and then his footsteps crunched away on the gravel, fading back toward the pool. The immediate threat was gone, but the trap we were in felt even tighter. "He'll be back," Lydia whispered, her breath hot against my ear. "He'll go get the key from the kitchen. We can't stay here." She didn't move away, though. Instead, she reached for the handle of the Cadillac's rear door. With a soft, well-oiled click, it swung open. "Get in," she commanded, her voice barely audible. "The tent is illegal. Even if he turns on the light, he won't see us in the back." It was a desperate move, retreating from one hiding spot into an even smaller, more intimate one, but panic made it seem logical. I scrambled into the plush leather interior, dragging my legs in, and Lydia followed instantly, pulling the heavy door shut until it latched with a solid thud. Inside the car, the world shrank to a few cubic feet of vintage luxury. The leather seats were cool and smooth, smelling of conditioning oil and time. It was pitch black, save for the faint sliver of moonlight filtering through the high garage window, illuminating the chrome trim of the dashboard. We were sitting close, my knee pressed against her thigh, the silk of her dress rustling with every small movement. The silence was deafening, magnified by the enclosed space. I could hear the engine cooling, ticking rhythmically, and the rapid, shallow sound of Lydia's breathing. "This car," she murmured, running her hand along the top of the leather seat, her fingers brushing my shoulder in the dark. "It's his pride and joy. He loves this thing more than he loves me. He spends hours out here, polishing it, talking to it. But he never drives it. He just possesses it." She turned to me, her face a pale oval in the gloom. "Do you know what it's like, Alex? To be a trophy that's kept on a shelf, dusted off for parties, and then put back in the dark?" Her voice was laced with bitterness and a raw, aching vulnerability that made my chest tighten. She wasn't just complaining. She was confessing the hollowness of her existence, inviting me into the secret tragedy of her marriage. The intimacy of the confession, combined with the physical proximity, created a charged atmosphere that was almost unbearable. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the silence. I should have said something comforting, something safe, but my throat was dry. "Lydia, if he finds us in his car," I started, but she cut me off by placing her hand on my knee. Her grip was firm, possessive. "He won't," she said, leaning closer until I could feel the warmth of her body radiating through my clothes. He's too busy being the big man out there. And Jason. Jason is a sweet boy, but he doesn't see things he doesn't want to see. She shifted, turning her body fully toward me, her legs tangling with mine in the cramped footwell. But you see me, don't you? You've always seen me. She reached up, her fingers tracing the line of my jaw, a touch that was electric and terrifying. It was a transgression, a crossing of a line that had existed since I was 5 years old. You're not a boy anymore, Alex, she whispered, her face inches from mine. You're a man who knows how to keep a secret. The moment stretched, suspended in the dark. The air in the car grew hotter, heavier. I felt a pull, a magnetic force drawing me toward her, fueled by the adrenaline of the hiding and the undeniable allure of the forbidden. Her lips were parted, her eyes searching mine in the shadows. I found myself leaning in, my resistance crumbling under the weight of her need and my own confusing desire. But just as our faces were about to touch, the harsh, metallic clank of the main garage door mechanism engaging shattered the silence. The motor roared to life, and the heavy door began to rise, screeching on its tracks. Light, blinding, artificial floodlight from the driveway, spilled into the garage, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Get down! Lydia hissed, shoving me down onto the floorboard. She threw herself across the back seat, lying flat, covering my head with the skirt of her dress. We froze, heart stopping. Through the tinted glass, I could see the silhouette of a man walking into the garage. It wasn't Jason. It was Mr. Henderson. He was whistling an off-key tune, holding a beer bottle. He walked right past the Cadillac, his shadow falling across the window, momentarily blocking the light. I held my breath, terrified that he would hear the blood rushing in my ears. He walked to the workbench, rummaged around for something, a screwdriver, a lighter, and then turned back. He paused by the car. He reached out and patted the roof, a possessive gesture. Don't worry, baby, he muttered to the car, his voice slurred. I'll take you out tomorrow. Show these idiots what real class looks like. He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound, and then walked out into the driveway. He didn't close the door. He left it wide open, exposing the garage to the party, to the guests, to anyone walking by. We were still hidden by the tent and the angle, but our fortress of solitude had been breached. Lydia slowly sat up, peeking over the window ledge. Her face was flushed, her eyes wide with a mix of terror and thrill. She looked down at me, still crouched on the floorboard, and a strange, wild smile touched her lips. She reached down and helped me up, her hand lingering on my arm. In the chaos of hiding, something had fallen out of her purse, which she had dragged in with her. It lay on the floor mat, glinting in the stray beam of light. It was a small silver locket. I picked it up. It was old, tarnished. I opened it. Inside wasn't a picture of her husband or Jason. It was a tiny, faded photo of a young man I didn't recognize, someone with kind eyes and long hair. That was my brother, she whispered, seeing what I held. He died when I was 20. He was the only person who ever really loved me. Until maybe tonight. The symbol of the locket shifted instantly, from a piece of jewelry to a token of her deepest, most guarded grief. She snatched it from my hand, closing her fist around it, but her eyes remained soft. We can't stay here, she said, her voice trembling. He left the door open. Anyone can see in. She looked toward the side door, the one Jason had tried earlier. The pool house, she whispered urgently. The pump room around the back. It has a lock. It's soundproof. Meet me there in 10 minutes. I need to make an appearance, get a drink, calm my nerves. But I'm not done, Alex. We haven't even started. She leaned in, her lips brushing my ear, a promise and a threat all at once. Don't make me wait. 10 minutes. The blue door behind the hydrangeas. She opened the car door on the side facing away from the driveway, slipped out into the shadows, and disappeared toward the house, leaving me alone in her husband's car, clutching the ghost of her perfume and the terrifying realization that I was going to follow her. Navigating the backyard party after leaving the garage felt like walking through a minefield while carrying a live grenade. The transition from the silent, suffocating intimacy of the Cadillac to the chaos of the poolside gathering was jarring. I kept my head down, dodging guests I had known since childhood, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Every laugh sounded like an accusation. Every glance felt like they knew where I had just been and who I had been with. I made my way to the perimeter of the garden, slipping behind the wall of oversized hydrangeas that screened the pool equipment from view. The blue door of the pump room was peeling and inconspicuous, hidden in the shadows of the hedges. I tried the handle. It was unlocked. I slipped inside, the heavy scent of chlorine and damp concrete instantly replacing the smell of barbecue and expensive perfume. The room was small, dominated by the roar of the filtration system and the hum of the heater. It was a mechanical heart, beating loudly enough to mask any whisper, any gasp, any secret. I waited in the semi-darkness, the blue light from the pool filtering through the glass block window, casting rippling, aquatic shadows on the walls. 2 minutes later, the door opened and closed with a soft click. Lydia was there. She had refreshed her drink, but her eyes were still wild, burning with the same reckless energy that had trapped me in the garage. She locked the door behind her, the sound of the deadbolt sliding home acting as the final seal on our conspiracy. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. She crossed the small space in 2 strides, pushing me back against the vibrating machinery of the pool heater. The heat in the room was oppressive, a physical weight that made the air thick and hard to breathe. "I thought you might run," she shouted over the hum of the pumps, her voice husky and desperate. "I thought you'd get scared and go find Jason." She dropped her wine glass on the concrete floor. It didn't break, just rolled away into the shadows, forgotten. She reached out, her hands gripping my shoulders, her fingers digging into the muscle. "But you didn't. You came." She looked up at me, her face illuminated by the shifting blue light, and I saw something devastatingly raw in her expression. It wasn't just lust. It was a profound, aching loneliness that she was trying to fill with danger. She pulled me down, her lips finding mine in a kiss that was less about affection and more about claiming ownership. It was fierce, tasting of wine and desperation, a collision that knocked the wind out of me. I responded instinctively, my hands finding her waist, pulling her closer until there was no space left between us. In the deafening noise of the pump room, hidden from the 50 people just yards away, we were crossing a line that would change the geometry of my life forever. The physical sensation was overwhelming, the heat of the machinery, the damp air, the softness of her dress, and the hard, undeniable reality of her body pressed against mine. "I need this, Alex," she confessed, pulling back just enough to look me in the eye, her hands cupping my face. "I need to feel something other than numb. My husband looks at me and sees an inventory item. Jason looks at me and sees a bank account. You look at me and see Lydia." This was the first true confession, the moment the game stopped being just a thrill and became an emotional entanglement. She wasn't just using me to hurt them. She was using me to save herself. The realization hit me hard. I wasn't just a participant, I was her lifeline. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the silver locket I had found in the car, the one with her deceased brother's photo. She didn't put it back in her purse. Instead, she pressed it into my hand, closing my fingers over the cold metal. "Keep it," she whispered. "He gave this to me before he deployed. He told me to be brave. Tonight, I need you to be brave for me." The symbol of the locket shifted violently in that moment. It transformed from a token of her past grief into a badge of our shared secret, a physical weight that bound me to her trauma and her rebellion. By accepting it, I was accepting her. But the bubble of our illicit sanctuary was about to burst. As I gripped the locket, I instinctively reached for my pocket to check the time, a nervous tick born of the constant fear of discovery. My hand hit empty fabric. I patted my other pocket. Nothing. A cold spike of adrenaline pierced through the heat of the room, sharper than any knife. My phone. It wasn't on me. My mind raced back to the garage, to the frantic scramble into the back of the Cadillac. I saw it vividly in my memory, sliding out of my pocket as I dragged myself across the leather seats, landing silently on the floor mat behind the driver's seat. "My phone," I choked out, pulling away from Lydia. "I left it in the car. In the Cadillac." Lydia's eyes widened, the passion instantly replaced by a dawn of horror. "Are you sure?" she demanded. "Check again." I didn't need to. I knew exactly where it was. And I knew that if it rang, or if the screen lit up, it would be a beacon leading her husband straight to the evidence of our presence in his sanctuary. Before we could formulate a plan, the muffled sound of a microphone feedback screech cut through the hum of the pool pumps. We both froze, turning toward the glass block window. Outside, the voice of Mr. Henderson boomed over the backyard speakers, jovial and slurred with drink. "All right, everyone. Attention! I promised you a treat tonight. Who wants to see where the real magic happens?" The crowd cheered. "I'm going to fire up the El Dorado. Let's get some volunteers to help me roll her out onto the driveway. The blood drained from my face. He wasn't just going to the garage. He was taking the guests with him. He was going to open the car doors. He was going to find my phone on the floorboard of his prized possession. If he found it, the questions would start. Why was Alex in my car? Why was the rear door unlocked? Why does it smell like my wife's perfume? The trail of breadcrumbs was glowing neon bright. He's going to find it, Lydia whispered, clutching my arm, her nails biting deep. If he finds your phone in the back seat, he'll know. He's paranoid, Alex. He'll check the security logs. He'll destroy you. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. You have to get it. You have to get there before he opens the back door. The choice was laid out before me, a brutal calculation of risk. I could stay here, safe in the pump room, and pray he missed it. But if he found it, the fallout would incriminate Lydia instantly. Or I could run. I could sprint back to the garage, beat the crowd, and retrieve the evidence, risking direct confrontation with her husband. It was a choice with a terrifying price, my safety for hers. I'm going, I said, the decision made before I even fully processed it. I shoved the silver locket into my pocket, the only thing I was taking with me. Stay here. Lock the door. Alex, be careful, she breathed, kissing me once more, hard and fast, a seal of desperation. I'll meet you back at the house, I said, grabbing the handle of the blue door. If I get the phone, I'll give you a signal. I'll spill a drink on the patio. It was a flimsy plan, a ticket to a future that seemed increasingly unlikely. I threw open the door and sprinted out into the darkness of the garden, racing against the booming voice of Mr. Henderson and the mob of guests moving toward the garage, running toward the very trap I had just escaped. I hit the driveway at a dead run, my dress shoes skidding on the wet pavement, just as Mr. Henderson grabbed the handle of the Cadillac's rear door. The crowd was cheering, a wall of noise and blinding floodlights. I had a split second to act, a choice between dignity and survival. I didn't slow down. I lunged forward, feigning a drunken stumble, and threw my body weight against the side of the car, colliding with Mr. Henderson and the open door frame with a bone-jarring impact. I cried out, exaggerating the fall, and slid down the side of the car, my hand snaking frantically into the footwell of the back seat as I hit the ground. It was a humiliating spectacle. I knocked a tray of champagne flutes out of a waiter's hand in the process, sending glass shattering across the driveway. But in the chaos, my fingers brushed the cold, sleek metal of my phone. I closed my fist around it and shoved it deep into my pocket just as Mr. Henderson roared in anger, grabbing me by the collar and hauling me up. What the hell is wrong with you, Alex? He shouted, his face purple with rage, shaking me like a rag doll. You scratched the paint. You clumsy idiot. The music stopped. The laughter died. 50 guests stared in shocked silence. Jason pushed through the crowd, looking at me with a mixture of confusion and secondhand embarrassment. Alex? Man, how much have you had to drink? He asked, his voice thick with disappointment. This was the sacrifice. To save Lydia, to hide the evidence of our betrayal, I had to destroy my own reputation. I had to become the drunken fool, the liability, the bad friend. I tripped. I stammered, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would burst. I'm sorry, Mr. Henderson. The pavement was wet. I hung my head, accepting the shame, feeling the heavy weight of the phone in my pocket, the proof of my guilt and my salvation. Mr. Henderson shoved me backward, dusting off his jacket with disgust. Get out of here, he spat. Go sleep it off somewhere else. You're done here tonight. But the danger wasn't over. As Mr. Henderson turned back to his beloved car to inspect for damage, he paused. He leaned into the back seat, the very space Lydia and I had occupied minutes ago. He sniffed the air, his brow furrowing. Why does it smell like that in here? He muttered, loud enough for the front row of guests to hear. It smells like midnight orchid. He turned slowly, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on his wife. Lydia was standing at the edge of the patio, freezing under his gaze. It was her signature scent. The connection was being made, the tumblers of his suspicion clicking into place. He looked from the car to me, and then to Lydia. The air grew thick with a terrifying tension. He knew something had happened in that car, even if he couldn't prove exactly what. Lydia moved then, breaking the paralysis. She didn't retreat. She walked straight into the line of fire. Frank, don't be ridiculous, she said, her voice steady and loud, projecting the perfect image of the weary hostess. I was looking for my earring in there earlier. I probably dropped it when I was checking the upholstery for you. She walked up to me, placing a hand on my arm, a gesture that looked maternal to the crowd but felt like a branding iron to me. Alex is hurt, Frank. Look at his arm. She pointed to a scrape on my elbow from the fall. I'm going to take him to the kitchen to clean this up and then call him an Uber. We are not making a scene at your party. She steered me away from her husband, her grip on my bicep bruisingly tight, forcing me toward the house before he could respond. She was saving me, but she was also pulling me deeper into the web. Inside the kitchen, away from the prying eyes of the guests, the dynamic shifted instantly. The moment the swinging door closed, blocking out the party, Lydia didn't let go. She pushed me against the granite island, her composure cracking. She wasn't the cool seductress anymore. She was a woman on the edge of a breakdown. He knows, she whispered, her hands trembling as she grabbed a bag of ice from the freezer. He doesn't know it was you, but he knows someone was in that car with me. He's paranoid, Alex. He tracks the mileage. He checks the seat positions. She pressed the ice pack against my arm, her eyes filled with tears. I didn't do this for fun, she confessed, the truth finally spilling out. I didn't trap you in the garage because I was bored. I did it because I wanted to burn it down. I wanted to do something so reckless, so unforgivable, that I couldn't go back to being his ornament. She looked at me, her soul bare. I'm not divorcing him, Alex. He owns everything. I signed a prenup that leaves me on the street. I am a prisoner in this house. You were the first time in 10 years I felt like I had a choice. The revelation hit me harder than the pavement outside. I wasn't just a fling, I was her rebellion. I was the sledgehammer she was using to crack the glass walls of her life. And looking at her now, vulnerable, terrified, and breathtakingly real, I realized I was willing to be that weapon. I reached out, my hand covering hers on the ice pack. I have the phone, I said quietly. There's no proof. He can suspect all he wants, but he can't prove anything. He will watch us now, she said, wiping her eyes. He'll check the security cameras. He'll question Jason. It's too dangerous. She stepped back, the mask of the hostess sliding back into place as the kitchen door creaked. You have to go. Take the Uber. Don't text me. It sounded like a goodbye, a logical end to a disastrous night. I nodded, turning to leave, my chest hollow. I walked to the back door, ready to disappear into the night and never look back. But as I reached for the handle, my phone buzzed. Not a call. A text? I pulled it out, expecting a reprimand from Jason. It was from an unknown number. I opened the message. It was a photo, a blurry, dark image taken from inside the pump room earlier that night. It was a photo of us. Someone had been outside the glass block window. Someone had seen. Beneath the photo was a single line of text. I saw what you did. Mr. Henderson pays well for information. My blood ran cold. The external danger had just materialized into a blackmailer. I turned back to Lydia, holding up the phone. She looked at the screen, and her face went white. We weren't just suspected by a jealous husband, we were being hunted by a third party. Who? She breathed. I don't know, I said, the fear morphing into a cold, hard resolve. But we can't stop now. If we stop, they send this to Frank. We have to find out who this is and silence them. Lydia looked at me, and I saw the fear in her eyes turn into steel. She wasn't going to let this destroy her. And neither was I. The guest house, she whispered, her voice fierce. The old cottage at the edge of the property. It has no cameras. Meet me there in 1 hour. We need to figure this out. I don't care if Frank is patrolling the grounds with a shotgun. I am not letting them win. The cliffhanger was set. We should have walked away. We should have cut our losses. But the thread had bound us together tighter than any kiss. I nodded, pocketing the phone. 1 hour, I agreed. I walked out the back door into the dark, leaving the safety of my old life behind, committed to a woman and a danger that were rapidly consuming me. The guest house was a relic of the estate's original layout, a small, vine-covered cottage nestled in the deepest shadows of the property, far removed from the manicured chaos of the pool party. Walking there felt like crossing a border into a hostile country. Every rustle of the wind in the oak trees sounded like footsteps. Every shadow looked like Mr. Henderson holding a shotgun. I slipped inside the unlocked door, the air instantly cooler and smelling of cedar and dust. Lydia was already there, pacing the small living room, her silhouette cut sharply against the moonlight filtering through the blinds. She wasn't crying anymore. The terror that had gripped her in the kitchen had hardened into a cold, diamond-sharp rage. She held a glass of scotch in one hand and her own phone in the other. When she saw me, she didn't rush into my arms. She motioned for me to close the blinds. "I know who it is," she said, her voice devoid of tremors. "I recognize the angle of the photo. It was taken from the service path. It's the catering manager. He's been watching the house all night, looking for loose valuables. Instead, he found us." She tossed her phone onto the coffee table. It showed a new message from the blackmailer, a demand for $50,000 in cryptocurrency, or the photo would be sent to Frank's email at midnight. We had 20 minutes. "I can pay it," Lydia said, her voice tight. "I have access to Frank's emergency rainy day fund. But if I pay him, he'll never stop. He'll bleed us dry until Frank notices the money is gone, and then we're dead anyway." She looked at me, her eyes dark and calculating. "We don't pay. We neutralize him." The shift in her was terrifying and awe-inspiring. She wasn't the victim. She was the architect of her own survival. She outlined the plan. The catering van was currently being loaded in the driveway. The manager would be the last one to leave. We had to intercept him, get the phone, and ensure his silence not with money, but with leverage. We moved through the dark garden like ghosts, circling back toward the service driveway. The catering van was there, engine idling. The manager, a greasy man named Carl whom I recognized from the bar setup, was tossing bags of trash into the back. He looked smug, checking his watch. Lydia stepped out of the shadows first. "Carl," she said, her voice loud and commanding. He jumped, spinning around. When he saw her, a sleazy smile spread across his face. "Mrs. Henderson, did you get my text? I was just about to hit send on the rest of the file." He held up his phone, waving it like a weapon. "I think your husband would be very interested in your extracurricular activities." I stepped out from behind the hedge, moving to flank him. Carl's smile faltered when he saw me, not a drunk kid anymore, but a desperate man with nothing to lose. "Hand over the phone," I said, my voice low. Carl laughed, backing toward the driver's door. "Or what? You'll beat me up? I'll scream. Frank is just inside. Scream all you want," Lydia said, walking closer, her heels clicking on the pavement. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, velvet bag, the one that held her diamond earrings. But instead of offering them, she opened the bag and dumped the contents onto the passenger seat of the van through the open window. It wasn't jewelry. It was a stack of silver antique spoons and a gold watch belonging to Frank. "I just planted those," she said, her voice ice cold. "I already called the police. I told them I saw the catering manager stealing family heirlooms. They're 2 minutes away." Carl froze. "If they search your van and find Frank's watch, you go to prison for grand larceny. You have a record, Carl." "I checked. 3 strikes law." The color drained from Carl's face. The blackmail had collapsed instantly against the weight of a much more immediate threat. "You're crazy," he whispered. "I'll show them the photo. And I'll say it's a deep fake you made to extort me after I caught you stealing," Lydia countered smoothly. "Who will they believe? The wife of Frank Henderson, or the thief with the stolen gold in his front seat?" The distant wail of sirens cut through the night air. It was a bluff. She hadn't called anyone yet, but Carl didn't know that. Panic seized him. He looked at the stolen goods, then at us. "Take it," he spat, throwing his phone at my chest. "I'm deleting the cloud backup. Just let me go." I caught the phone, quickly navigating to the gallery and the deleted folder, erasing everything, then smashing the device on the pavement for good measure. "Get out," I said. Carl didn't hesitate. He swept the planted items onto the driveway and peeled out of the estate, tires screeching, disappearing into the night. We stood alone in the driveway, the adrenaline crashing out of us. The threat was gone. We had one. But as I looked at Lydia, standing triumphant and terrifying in the moonlight, I realized the victory had cost us the illusion of romance. We weren't lovers, we were accomplices. The intimacy of the garage and the pump room felt distant now, replaced by the cold reality of what we were capable of. Frank came out onto the porch, attracted by the noise of the van. "Everything all right out here?" he called out, oblivious to the war that had just been fought on his driveway. "Fine, darling," Lydia called back, her voice transforming instantly into the sweet, doting wife. "Just making sure the staff cleaned up properly." She turned to me, her eyes filled with a tragic final resignation. She reached out and straightened my collar, her hand lingering over my heart for a split second. "We can't do this, Alex," she whispered. "We pushed our luck tonight and survived. Next time, we won't." "I know," I said, the words tasting like ash. "So this is it? The secret?" "The absolute secret," she agreed. "You go back to being Jason's friend. I go back to being Mrs. Henderson. We never speak of this. We never touch. We take this to our graves." She leaned up and kissed me on the cheek, a chaste, cold kiss that felt like a door slamming shut. "You saved me tonight, Alex. Now save yourself. Go home." She turned and walked back toward the house, toward her husband, slipping back into the cage she had briefly escaped, leaving me alone in the dark with the shattered pieces of a blackmailer's phone and a broken heart. 1 month later, the summer ended, and I went back to law school in the city, putting miles between myself and the Henderson estate. I hadn't seen Jason or his mother since that night. I drowned myself in studies, trying to forget the smell of gasoline and expensive perfume, but the memory of the garage haunted me. I checked the news, half expecting to see a divorce announcement or a scandal, but there was nothing. The Hendersons were the picture of suburban perfection. It was as if I had hallucinated the entire thing. Then, on a rainy Tuesday, a package arrived at my apartment. It was a heavy, rectangular box wrapped in plain brown paper with no return address. My hand shook as I cut the tape. Inside was a leather-bound case. I opened it. Resting on the velvet lining was a brand new, state-of-the-art smartphone, a replacement for the one I had sacrificed. But underneath the phone was something else. A single, silver key on a plain ring. There was no note, no explanation. But I knew what it was. It wasn't a key to her house or a hotel room. It was the spare key to the 1967 Cadillac Eldorado. I picked it up, the cold metal heavy in my palm. It was a message. A symbol that she hadn't forgotten that she was keeping the car, and our memory, waiting for a day when the garage door might open again. I walked to the window, looking out at the city rain, and slipped the key into my pocket, my hand closing around it like a promise.